right, guys. Thank you so much for doing this. This is really exciting. In tradition, keeping with tradition, we're going to do some quick introductions. I'm Bill Evans, the CEO and Managing Director of Rock Health. And a fun fact, you guys already know it's my daughter's birthday because everybody said happy birthday to her earlier. Thank you for that, by the way. And my fun fact is that I actually have stage experience, but I'd never delivered lines on stage. I wrote, and I did this for money. I rode a unicycle in like a circus performance when I was in high school. I picked up money on the weekends.
Did you really?
True story.
Excellent side hustle.
But they never gave me lines until I started at Rock Health. So.
My turn, introduction and fun fact. Hi everyone, I'm Heather Fernandez. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Solv Health. What we do is we're building a marketplace to connect consumers with high quality, same day convenient care. We were founded in 2016. Our strategy is on the consumer side, super simple, super boring. How do you answer 3 questions? Where should I go for the problem I have? When can I be seen? How much does it cost? Super unsexy, totally not solved. And then on the provider side, what we do is we've built a software to effectively be your consumer-facing front end, basically doing all the things until your practice management. So from your online booking to your wait time management to SMS-based communications. Since founding, we've seen 7.5 million patients through the platform. What else? And what is my fun fact? I started my career in politics, and one of the coolest things that I did was I snuck into the White House Correspondents' Dinner with Sean Spicer and took a picture with Alan Greenspan. I have photographic evidence that I can share after the panel today.
Is that legal?
Which part?
We're going to hear more about that at the cocktail party.
I have a lot of stories about that.
Anyway, I'm Nancy Brown. I am a general partner at a investment firm called Oak HCFT. HC stands for healthcare, in case anyone, and FT stands for fintech. I feel insecure about being up here as a venture person, so I need to quickly tell you about my operational background, so I have some credibility on the panel, talking about growth and scale. So I spent my whole career, 30-something years, in healthcare. Started off in a staff model HMO in Boston, running large clinics, very much like Kaiser, and then realized that we had a tech problem, making a very long story short, became an entrepreneur, and had 3 early stage companies. The first and last I sold to McKesson, and the one in the middle was Athena Health, which I was there 3 years before we went public and 3 years after. And now I focus my time on a lot of early and mid-stage companies that are tech-enabled service companies focused on disease states like renal, women's health, end of life, opioid addictions, et cetera. Lots and lots more to talk about. And my fun fact, I was raised by immigrants, so like I was very straight and narrow, like don't do anything wrong because
I was raised by immigrants.
Yes, but my fun fact, which people love to make, I think the thing they like to make fun of, I'm not sure it's fun, is that I studied reproductive physiology in college. So I was an expert in, I wanted to be a wild animal, an exotic animal reproductive physiologist. Wow. Anyone? No.
Yeah, no.
No.
It sort of seems like a humble brag.
Humble brag. Well, needless to say, I could only get into medical school, which I didn't go to, not into vet school. So the natural path from reproductive physiology is, I don't know, venture capital. I don't know. There's no segue. No appropriate segue to that.
Awesome. So hello, everybody. So my name is Sean. I'm the co-founder and CEO of OMada Health. We build digital care programs in disease areas where it is crystal clear that digital is the way to optimize for outcomes and cost savings. Honored to have been actually part of the very first Rock Health class, helped paint the walls of the Chinatown office, for those of you who really were there from the very beginning, like myself. Fun fact, my wife and I are due with our first next Friday. This is exciting. Baby Aletta is on the way. Maybe today. If you see me look at my notifications on my phone and have to leave immediately, that's what's going on.
That would make the whole panel.
Yeah.
Like the whole conference, actually. This is phenomenal. So given the breadth and depth of expertise here, and just sort of the timing in the industry, right? We're at a place in the industry where there are a lot of companies that are going through growth. but digital health is different. So maybe we just start off with, you got to grow. You got to raise the money. You got to grow the ops and the product, and then you got to grow your market. And we'll start with the two current founders and go to the former one maybe after that, Nancy. And then, so what's unique about that in digital health? And I know, let's start with you, Heather, because you're thinking about that from the consumer side, and then Sean, you're coming at it from the B2B angle, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, well, Solv sells B2B, right? So we have a marketplace, which is a tool for consumers, but our monetization is B2B. First with providers and then with navigators and payers. So I think a lot about this concept of how much oxygen do you need in the room. And by oxygen, I mean like talent capacity and financial capacity when you think about sort of scaling at the early days of digital health. And a lot of that has to do with your go-to-market. If your go-to-market is selling directly and starting with payers and very large enterprises, then you need the talent capacity and the financial capacity to enable that to happen. Meaning, a lot of money and probably some expensive hires who have lots of connectivity into those potential customers. If your go-to-market is more SMB, small and mid-sized business, right, then your talent capacity and financial capacity is different. However, if you get an RFP from a really cool institution that wants you to fill out their 80-page RFP, fly out 10 times to meet different groups of people to figure out if they want to do a 3-month pilot, I think you really have to think about the oxygen in the room and how much capacity does your organization have to actually do that at that moment. It's a little bit oversimplified, but I think, particularly in healthcare, it's interesting because so much of the go-to-market is very large enterprise. There was a woman on the panel yesterday, Louise someone, who was really awesome, who advises employers, and she said, I always tell my employers, if some startup with 8 people comes and says that they can service your 200,000 employees, they can't, right? And so I think that is the challenge to think about. And specifically, tactically, as an entrepreneur, it's who should I raise from? How much money do I need to raise to get to my first proof of concept? And then how do I think about all the opportunities that come my way, given the first 2?
My guidance to entrepreneurs entering enterprise healthcare always starts with the following, which is sometimes a wake-up call, in that enterprise healthcare entrepreneurship, in my view, is the double black diamond of enterprise entrepreneurship. And you have to both appreciate, recognize, come to peace with some of the norms and the essential laws of physics of the US healthcare system, and design your operations, raise capital against it, design your strategies against it, because sales cycles are long. It's a very risk-averse buying market. I remember the exact moment that you described where Omada's 20 people. I am sitting across the room from the head of benefits at Costco who did a pilot with Omada, and she says, Sean, we break vendors all the time.
Right.
Give me confidence that if we deploy you nationally, you're not going to break. And all I told her, I was like, Donna, we will work the problem. I care about the details. Our number one mandate will be to make sure this is successful, because I know that if this is not, that's something that will be a signal to the rest of the HR buying market, and our life is going to depend on serving your needs. So but those moments are tricky, and it's a risk-averse buying market. You have to think of it as something that requires an extra level of depth and thoughtfulness as an entrepreneur than I think in other industries. Otherwise, it won't work for you.
I think that's exactly right. Can I just build on that for 1 sec? And sometimes you might should walk, right? Like if Omada didn't have the capacity and that partner was someone where you actually might get broken, it might mean that as an entrepreneur, you have to say no in that moment. And that's a super hard thing to do.
Well, spending a week trying to figure out if you can build the capacity.
Right. Of course.
Exactly.
And so Nancy, I mean, from the investor point of view, you see probably in your portfolio, and we talked about this a little bit, sort of the 0 to 200 or the 0 to large number, right? You could sign a single contract, and you see this across a bunch of companies, and you've done this in the inside. So what's the view, and how do you think about it maybe now in terms of capital allocation? How do you support the company up front so they can scale? It's not necessarily going to be linear, right?
Yeah, no, it's not. I mean, I feel like back when I started my first company, it was a very slow roll. It was more a garage, it was an early stage startup. We had a few people, we grew over time. And it's just not like that, or at least it's not the way we're experiencing it at all in our portfolio. And a lot of them, similar to what Sean's talking about, have come pre-revenue and sometimes pre-product with an anchor client, with a big anchor payer or big anchor employer. And others do their pilots or proof of concepts, and then immediately, since I hope we're picking companies that are solving undeniable problems where the payer or employer can't go out to the market and find a vendor that can do that, so they're willing to work with you to get you to where you need to go. But the scale is incredible. But we're talking about a great problem, right? We're talking about the next problem, like post, do I have a market, do I have a product? It's all of a sudden this incredible immediate overnight. And I think I talked to, when we were prepping for this, about it's not unusual for my companies to go from 20 to 250 because we deliver care and with one contract, in terms of employees. And we have to think through, the capital is not, is like the least of the worries. I don't mean to say that in an arrogant way, but they,
for you, baby.
well, we're giving the capital, so I guess I'm not worried about it. When I see, we understand when we go in exactly what those trigger points are going to look like and what the capital allocations are going to be. Yeah. It's not as though we're like, oh my gosh, really? We thought the 10 people were going to, But what we do deal with, just to go high level over it, is operational, the design, the organizational design. It's at that point where we have a lot of the original team, often college friends, in jobs that aren't going to scale up. So you've got a number of things happening. You may need to move some people into new jobs, right-sized jobs. Yeah. Culturally, how are you going to deal with it? In the case of our companies, we get many multi-city companies because they're going into regions. Mm-hmm. So suddenly, how do we deal with the culture? How do we extend this? And then just overall professionalizing. So, and a lot of that comes with some difficulty. I can ask the entrepreneurs here on the panel, but it's difficult to go from this, my original team that charged the hill, our dog, and to, oh my gosh, I've got 6 cities, I've got all of these regulatory people keeping an eye on me. And so when we think about scale, we think about all of those things.
Yeah, and you need a dog policy after a while too, for the office.
All kidding aside, you need a dog policy.
You actually do.
I'm not joking.
On that,
go ahead, Heather.
May I?
Yeah.
I mean, on that point of the team, prior to Solv, I was at a very different kind of startup. I was the employee number 12 at a company called Trulia, and we built that to 1,000 people over 7 years. And so you see a lot of, in this way, I think this is actually a very similar challenge. For the entrepreneur, I think what's particularly hard is when I'm hiring that head of sales today, I don't know if that head of sales is going to be selling to the next 20 very large companies, or if that's going to be a total bust. And really what I need someone who can wear multiple hats. I think that's actually where it gets challenging. I don't know if you agree, Sean, because I think oftentimes entrepreneurs want to solve for the 1 year out, 2 years out, 3 years out, where realistically you might not have a very clear picture of what that looks like. And so oftentimes as a founder or early employee, you sort of need to find the in-between. Someone who can wear multiple hats today, I think they can scale, I'm not certain, and then sort of deal with whether or not they can scale at the appropriate time. Right. And be comfortable if you have to make moves a year from now or 3 years from now.
And make them fast.
And make them
have
fast.
To make them.
Yeah. But it's an acceptance, that that's just part of the game.
And I think, every year your company is different. Like you look out at the room and it's a very, very different animal than it was the years before, and the needs to serve the market are different, the needs to serve your participants are different, the operating norms need to be different. And I think that's the nuance is making sure to embrace the fact that each year you're maturing the business, celebrate it.
Yeah.
Where you roll out a new process for designing next year's strategy, lining up next year's budget, and you celebrate that as a point of company maturity while making sure to retain cultural threads that stay true, from the beginning, and ideally through 10,000, 20,000 people, right? But it's that's one of the most taxing things about building a business. It's the people side, of course, because your company's changing so fast that the needs are going to be very, very different. And the way I most often think about it is just a move from generalist to specialist. And what does that feel like if you're the person who, ran like this full aspect of the customer life cycle now needs to just focus on that, right? Mm-hmm. What if you're, what does that feel like to be able to encourage folks to let go of their Legos and be like, look, it's actually, I know it feels like less of a gig here, but you're going to be able to go deeper and at higher scale, and that's a very challenging cultural dimension that every single company has to go through. I've yet to find an entrepreneur has faced similar challenges on the talent side as you go through each chapter. But I think that I tend to find the most zen in actually celebrating the fact that Omada is maturing as a business each year and being very vocal with that with the team.
Yeah, I mean, part of the specialization that I think you're talking about, all of us are circling around, is you have to invest on internal innovation, on making yourself more effective day by day, year by year, to scale, right? Initially, it's just get the product out there, make sure it's the right product in the right market. So one of the things we chatted about on a call, if I'm remembering right, sort of, that internal innovation is it still costs, the innovation, you're using the same brain cells, the same people. It takes a tax, I think was one of you sort of said it. It's effort, and it's not going to your customer, but it's making you more effective as you scale. Can you just talk about what that means and how you've done it, how you're coaching others who are doing it in Nancy's case? And what do you need to optimize? What are the dials you need to turn?
I'll just start if it's okay. So our companies are almost all tech-enabled service companies, so they deliver service. So I think about a company like Aspire. I don't know if any Aspire employees are out there, but which is our palliative care company that Anthem now owns. These companies come to us with a clinical process that they're going to apply, and when applied, they get to a result. And it's usually doesn't come out of the gate when we invest with a beautiful margin attached to it. So the whole point is that the full expectation that there will be innovation. So in the case, and this is directionally correct, but in the case of a lot of our companies, including them, they might have 10 clinical levers they have to pull to get to the outcome for the patient. And then they begin to do two things. Really study the process and say, well, it's not 10, it's actually 6. Oh no, it's actually 5, and it's not doctors, it's nurses. Oh, it's not really nurses. You can use some tech here. So it's the tech enablement and using real process methodologies to study and A/B test all of the things that you're doing to get to the outcome. And I'm sure this is absolutely the case in both the companies. So that is an absolute expectation. It's not something that's fun to do. It's something that's expected.
Yeah, I think it's, I would put our business in that category too. We have a very heavy people component to what we do. It's blended with technology, I think in an artful way, but the biggest transformational moments for us is just, frankly, really strong ops leadership, right? That they're, they think so much about, process, flows, metrics, all the just building big orgs, and it's just been awesome to watch these amazingly talented executives learn from them and be like, that's great, keep doing that. But you've got to and there's a lot of people that have those talents, and it's important as a company hits that moment where you have it's like the best kind of panic ever when you see this wall of customers coming that you have to serve, and to find the talent to help serve that that's the night and day difference.
I'll just chime in with two quick things. To start from scratch as a startup, you're doing so many unscalable things. Yeah. And so that's great. It's what you're supposed to do. I think this element of how do you make the transition over to being more scalable, because it's not as if you do that all at once.
No,
right? And it's okay to do very unscalable things as a large company, as long as they're the right unscalable things, and you need to operationalize and make more efficient the other things. Ops is oftentimes sort of the place where a lot of this happens. But I would add that the way we do it is we often are asking the teams, where are the things that are unscalable that we should be making more efficient today? And that has proven to be quite fruitful, right? Because it's the front lines who are seeing this process. I now repeat the same thing for every new customer that comes in, these 20 steps. Or this onboarding flow is no longer necessary because we can do a lot of this digitized. Or this, user flow. But I think it's sort of empowering the teams, one, to do the unscalable thing, but make it part of the practice to try and highlight where are the areas where we can drive efficiency when it makes sense today, versus, in the 2 months before you're prepping to come meet with Nancy, and all of your numbers or at least some set of your numbers need to look much better.
And a tripwire is you design the process for that year to scale, but then next year there's actually different needs in the business.
Yeah.
And you actually are paying a tax from whatever you implemented last year. So I think equally you have to think about, let's inventory what we codified for last year's Omada, and let's think about, does that still apply to this year's Omada? If the answer is yes, great. If the answer is it's getting in our way, then you work to tune, because you do run the risk as you scale and introduce needed processes of building a process debt.
Yeah.
And so, you have to occasionally find a set of processes and declare bankruptcy on them, and then, retune them for this year's business.
What's the leadership challenge around this, right? I mean, because you've got a group of people that you've asked them to do a set of things, they've done that was success. We're redefining success. I mean, paraphrasing a little bit, Sean, you're saying, hey, we're going to redefine success. We're going to set a new mark. But these are very different things potentially that we want to do now. Is it new people as you grow, or is it leadership through the leadership of the team as it is? What are the challenges around this? Or is it just really easy, I guess?
Super easy.
And you saw this at Athena too. I mean,
I see it in all. I think you. So there's ops and then there's ops. Like we have about 3 COO positions open right now, and people forget to ask what the O, which, what ops are we talking about? What kind of ops? And then you have people who like to go into steady state ops. There are people who like to create an operational process from nothing, and there's ones who like to continually break it and make it better. And they're really different people. Yeah. So I would say, and I think I just, if there's one position I see people hire badly for, it's that. They'll say, we're going to get that guy who was at this, direct-to-consumer company. They scaled like crazy. I'm like, they scaled what? Like, what did they scale?
Exactly.
And does it have anything to do with what we're scaling? So I think it's the ability to know that it's the job is never done, and that and what's fun about it is taking it all apart and putting it back together again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to come back to, there was a moment, 3 conversation points ago about finance and sort of when to, a little bit about when to raise, how much to raise, and Nancy, you sort of said, the capital is not the biggest problem. There was some respectful disagreement.
It's all in my pockets.
I think there's maybe a legitimate question in here around, okay, well, can you raise too little, too much? Maybe even the more difficult one, counterintuitive one is, can you raise too much when you're at the point of scaling? What does that look like? Is there such a thing as too much? I'm going to take Heather's side, but plays devil's advocate. So let's raise more, but could you raise too much? What would happen if you did?
I mean, there is an entrepreneurial meme, which is you can never raise too much.
Exactly.
Right? And if someone wants to give you money, you should take it, and as much of it as you can, because it might not be there next quarter, next month. I don't necessarily agree with it.
No.
And that I've seen a lot of money at play, and you end up with a lot of consequences associated with having too much money. It's sort of, here's my analogy. I'm going to sound like a VC. Like, there was a time when I could only afford Old Navy jeans for $22, and I loved them. But as soon as I could afford $140 Madewell jeans, I was like, these are great, and I'm only going to buy $140 jeans. Does anyone get the analogy? Like, I think the jeans are incrementally better, I think. But it was easy to make that decision because there's more money available. So, I mean, as an entrepreneur, clearly you need to make sure that you have runway and capacity, and raising money is an important part of the job, and you should do it when you can. But I do think there is some tempering of as much as you can, as often as you can. It feels like that might lead to more suboptimal consequences. Tell me why I'm wrong.
I agree. I mean, I think you have to assess the current strategy against the current market needs and the current landscape, and use that to give an input to your process of thinking about your capital needs. I think that what I've seen entrepreneur friends do is, especially in the early days, go out asking for a lot, get it, but you've got this implied value calculus that you go out asking for 20. If the company's not ready for 20, it pushes up your post to a level where the expectations based on what you're doing are so insanely high that you're not going to be able to deliver on the enterprise value growth, so that when you go out for that next round of financing, your post doesn't spook the next person to invest. And so there's this is a real thing, and it kills companies.
Yeah.
Or it creates an awful situation, which is a down round, because who wants to lead a down round if you can avoid it? It's an awful thing for everybody. So you can run the risk of that, and you have to be cautious. There's a really good Mark Suster post called Raise on the Upper Side of Normal, which I like, where if you have a business that you believe is unique, differentiated, there is a bigger inherent enterprise value in the business than others, you should be aggressive with the ask, but like
Yes.
shoot to the upper side of normal, unless there's external circumstances that change the strategy there. But I do think I think it's important, and I think it's perhaps underappreciated. You probably see it on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I think I see it all, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think that I think your comments are perfect, and I'll say some things that are so basic, but are so amazing to me that people still don't know the basics of this. And maybe I didn't when I was fundraising my first couple of times, which is have some idea of where that money will take you. So I've had every comment from, the usual thing when someone says I'm raising 2 million, I'm raising 10, you're like, what are the use of proceeds? But literally, where are you going to be? Because people come in the next round and they want to see that you have hit your KPIs, or you've incrementally improved something. You've got more revenue, you've got more implementation, you've got more tech, or you have something that you want to buy. I often have people say to me, well, what amount do you want to invest? And I'm like, don't ever say that. Like, this has nothing to do with me. Like, it's really not up to me.
Yeah.
I do have a number I would like, but that's not the driving force. The driving force is, what are the use of proceeds, and where is it going to get you? And even all of my companies today, just constantly getting them ready for the next round, and having to take out the old deck from the last round and say, here's what you said you were going to do. Let's see whether or not you've had enough of a movement around all your key metrics that you will get the up round that you want to get. So yes, the point is you have to think about dilution. You have to think about whether or not you can live up to the round pricing, and you have to be very clear. I see more people taking too little money than too much often, I think, and then they don't get to enough of a trajectory on the growth of their business, and they're sitting there in a very awkward, like, we almost got that contract, but we didn't get it, and then you have to go out and you have to fundraise before you've hit your milestones, which is awkward.
And I think the answer is you can raise too little, you can raise too much, and you're not going to get it perfectly because you're doing something very uncertain. So it's you just have to make your best judgment call based on the task at hand for the next 18, 24 months.
Yeah. I mean, this is the point I was trying to make on
dive
the
into the abyss.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. But the oxygen, right? If you're going into a long sales cycle, you've got to raise enough to actually have enough at-bats to get to that milestone and close the deal.
Right.
And so what is that math?
Do you think investors over the course of, like, digital health has been, in this current incarnation, the amount of money is going in has grown quite a bit, but it's really over the last 5 years. So do you think investors have adapted over time? I just want to compare and contrast maybe earlier, 6, 7, 8 years ago, more when you most recently got started. Nancy, you've been at this. So, or have those expectations not evolved in terms of sales cycle and sort of inflection points and the kinds of things that they're expecting when you've pitched to them? Or is it same, different? If so, how so?
In terms, what's the?
Oh, sorry, their expectations of
how much you're going to
milestone.
How much? That's interesting. I think the seasoned healthcare investors understand that healthcare is a long game. And I think it's important. I think it's especially in the early days, if you really do want to build an enterprise healthcare company, you're committed to that vision because you believe it's the way that you can best build an enterprise that has impact in the world. My guidance to folks is start on the healthcare side, get people around the table that really understand healthcare. And because it's more difficult, it's more expensive. It's not, you look on the left end of the spectrum, an enterprise software company on the right end, the next biotherapeutics company. It's you're not quite there in healthcare ID, but you're going to need a little bit more capital and time than otherwise. And there's going to be weird things that come up that you're just going to have to power through.
Yeah. One of the audience questions here was, specifically, how do you right-size expectations given that digital therapeutics, in particular for you, Sean, takes a long time to see the lifestyle change? It sounds like you're sort of answering that. You've got experience. You feel there are experienced enough investors who understand.
Well, I mean, for us, it depends on your go-to-market. There's various kind of approaches. I think for us, the big inflection points were just really investing a ton in our channels, earning the right to go to scale with some of our large payers, right? And it's very different. I mean, when you're working with employers tend to preference, if they can, to buy through channel. That's just the buying behavior of an employer. So if you can walk in the door to an account and be like, oh, well, wonderful news. Who are your TPAs? Oh, it's Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois, and you got a little bit of Cigna. Like, great. We don't have to actually do anything to get started. Like, let's, we're in network with both. Let's market to your employees. Like that dramatically improves the sales efficiency. And the most harrowing moments for Omada is knowing that that's a possibility, seeing it, because there's pockets of that happening right in front of your eyes, but making sure that you're able to bit by bit earn the trust of your channel partners to really take you to scale. And then and that is, for our go-to-market, is and was a pivotal point in the journey.
Yeah. Can I ask Sean a question? How did you handle the having earned it? Because I totally agree with how you frame that, right? There are elements of your growth where you're like, you sort of need to earn the right to be able to do the next thing. And then you're in this sort of difficult period where you haven't earned it yet, right? And yet,
I think just grit. It's funny. I mean, you have to
grind it out.
This is just all entrepreneurship. I think you ask like the successful CEOs at the end of the day what made it happen. You're like, well, I didn't give up.
Yeah.
Like you have to care. It's true. It's like you have to. There's all the like table stakes characteristics you need to have, but it's that's what it amounts to. Like you have to care so much about the problem, and believe in a world that has what you're building at grand scale in a way that's made an impact on humanity. You have to believe it strongly enough that it almost hurts, and it feels like a compulsion. Like you'll get hit in the face so many times you don't even care, and you'll just keep powering through and keep your eye on it. And like you need to pull energy from that fourth stomach, you do it, right? You pull the energy and you make it happen. So it's like you have to feel that about the problem in order to muster the level of determination to get through all the complexity in building a business, especially, in enterprise healthcare. And the beautiful thing about enterprise healthcare is there's lots of problems that can fire you up in such a way, which I think is that's like the secret of enterprise healthcare entrepreneurship, because there's more problems to fall in love with, in my view, that feel good if executed against for the world.
So we got a top voted question here for Nancy in particular, and we could bounce it around a little bit though. Nancy, what do you look for in growth in these companies at the various stages?
I mean, what percentage? Is that like a...
I think the question is more, when you see different stages of growth, what do you, lots of growth.
Lots of growth.
What are these inflection points?
Yeah, so we're looking for, obviously we're in all stages, but when it gets into a growth stage, we certainly like to see, 30 to 60% growth, or sometimes we have 200% growth, but we expect to see growth, and we expect to see growth and margin expansion, at the same time. It doesn't mean that we do dumb things around to get to margin expansion. It just means that we have to work both sides of the equation, because eventually we have to stop losing money on every client. So, but the biggest thing, and I don't know if it's answering what people have on their mind, is consistent growth over time. So when people come to me and they want me to invest, and they've got $1 million, and now they're at 2, and then they have 20 is the next, the next year, the year we haven't seen yet, it's probably unlikely. So we want to see consistent growth over time. And we don't want to see that growth percentage come down. We want to see it go up and not come down for a long time. There is a point at which you can't keep up with that percentage growth. Certainly at Athena, after we went public, it was hard to keep up with that growth. That's when you have to start thinking about M&A and inorganic growth. But yeah, so just consistency. And when we look at growth, this is probably way too much detail, but the thing is trying to figure out what the unit of measure is around what you're selling. How many contracts is it? What's the total contract value? So when they say we're going to go to 20, and you just do this like, oh, you're going to have to sell 16 payers that aren't in your pipe yet, and like just knowing that the sales cycles are 18 months. So again, just trying to make sure all those metrics work. And so we would prefer to come in after they hit the 20 and they're going to 40. And chances are they'll miss that, but there'll be a point at which they start to get consistent.
Right, consistency. So you touched on almost perfectly the very next top voted question, which is I'm going to paraphrase, but when is profitability important across all of you? I think this would be really interesting.
Well, I'll just answer for Athena. So we went public without being profitable. We were in a culture in that company where EBITDA was actually kind of taboo because it was all about investing in the business. And our investors, which was actually my firm and Venrock, were very in favor of that because we had a path to profitability, but there was a time for growth and market share, grabbing market share, but it wasn't as though profitability was just a hope. There was a plan. And to the earlier question about operations, we went from having a lot of our smart friends from various schools in Boston running ops to hiring professionals out of Fidelity and other places, and they just found, they were like, that's adorable, that like ops thing you guys did. And they just literally found margin, like buckets of margin in the business post-IPO, and that was awesome. So
buckets of margin.
Buckets
I
of
love
margin.
That.
So again, but you have to compare it against why, you can't just not worry about profitability. You have to have a reason because you're focused on things like marketing spend, sales spend, growth.
Anything
With
to
you.
add to that?
No, I think I'm with you. I think the one compounding dynamic is you really have to think about the competitive context. And there is a dynamic in healthcare where it's like if you secure a client, and for the next couple of years, it's probably your client. So you have to really think about, all right, there is a little bit more of land grab market characteristics, I think, in healthcare. So you have to reflect on that. I do think first principles, make sure to keep an eye on your unit econ, right? That has to hang together. And then also just remember that as the business gets to real scale, really big scale, what is a business designed to do? A business is designed to serve value, get money in return, and have that value hit the bottom line. So it's like you have to make sure that you always, in moments of growth, reflect on, per Nancy's point, like, well, what is the path to the end state here? Like, do I see the sort of levers that can kind of get me there despite being in a mode of investment for a strategic reason, a competitive reason, you name it.
The only thing I'll add on that is we've found it to be a very useful practice, even at the early stages, when it feels like an asinine thing to do, to build out the 3-year model. Maybe that sounds asinine, maybe it's obvious, but when you have very little revenue in the door and you have 10 people around a table, it feels a little goofy, right, to build out a 3-year model around a lot of things that you don't know. But we've found that it's a good practice, because to your point, what we have heard mostly from the venture community is the right numbers need to be moving in the right direction. And back to my earlier comment, building some of that rigor in earlier, I think sort of helps you at least get down that path when you really are at Omada scale.
Yeah, and we provide a lot of, as any venture firm would, we provide a lot of benchmarks. So if we see things, so there's like a few goofy things people do, not you guys, of course, and not our firms, but like they overspend on marketing and they have no way to tie it back to the growth. And they are like, well, no one's going to be upset with us because we tried to grow. But so we will go after levers, all the time to say, like, that is just out of whack for the type of company that you are, and just dig in.
Well, this is super helpful. Guys, we're out of time. I really appreciate your coming out here and doing this. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.